This is the story of the French Revolution, of how the most neglected people in the beginning stood up for themselves despite the consequences in order to fight for justice, especially for a government based from equality. Let us start from the beginning, with the Third Estate. Everything had gone wrong for them. The people of the lowest estate in France had made their life based off scraps. Although France was rich and populous, their lives were miserable as the higher socially ranked people caused it to be. They had no food due to terrible harvests, and they had no money from paying excessive taxes, and they had no way to express their power or view within the government as they were always voted out. The awful conditions ranging from social, political, and economic problems of the Third Estate sparked the first interests of a revolt or a revolution. Due to all the poor treatment they received, they despised the monarchs. They most all believed that they were hiding something selfishly that would benefit their country with all of the riches they possessed regardless of the economic, social, and political state France was in. As the monarchs wanted to try and solve the solution of France's bankruptcy and decline, they held a meeting of the Estates General. The Third Estate decided to take this as an opportunity to speak their mind on the problems of their country. Bringing nearly 600 people to the meeting, the Third Estate was the most widely represented. However, the tables turned, and despite them being the most represented, their ideas were neglected due to their social stance. This caused a historical split, leading them to create their own National Assembly. The National Assembly was comprised of the split Third Estate from the rest of the country. They stood for many different ideas that contradicted the French monarchy and fought for them throughout the Revolution. The different ideas included more fair representation within the government, fighting for economic reform, and arguably the most important, personal rights based from liberty. With these similar thoughts present between the members of the National Assembly, they took the famous oath standing up for their beliefs, separate from the French monarchy. It is called the Tennis Court Oath. This oath allowed people within this National Assembly to remain united and, I quote, not to separate and to reassemble wherever circumstances require, until the Constitution of the Kingdom is established. The promise most basically stated that the people who were a part of this National Assembly or revolution would fight for what they stood for until there was change instated. And with their drive and determination, they made their lower class selves heard, and they stayed for the fight of the revolution. On the opposite side of the social platform of France lie the monarchs, King Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette. Both figures lived lavishly in the Palace of Versailles, surrounded by the rich luxuries of being a royal. They were both completely oblivious to what was going on within the poorer social classes, such as the Third Estate, as they were just carrying on with their extravagant lifestyles. Many rumors had begun to be spread by the revolutionaries desiring a constitutional monarchy, including them hiding food that could benefit their population as mentioned before, this causing several disastrous occasions. One included the Women's March, led by angry peasant women of the Third Estate, to get them to move from the luxurious Versailles to Paris, highlighting the fact that the revolution was originally based on the lack of resources to support a population such as food and money. Despite all of these circumstances, the monarchs remained rich, as evident by their physique and dress. In the end, they were still hated by those desiring constitutional government. However, it was realized that the constitutional government must sprout from the monarchy, using it as a foundation for change, therefore leaving the king as a key player to transform the government. The monarchs did eventually realize the situation they were in, but they both still despised the idea of less power under a constitution, which led to a revolution anyways. The revolution was well underway, with the revolutionaries and the Third Estate planning their next steps to constitutional and representational justice. The National Assembly began to grow in power as many people began to realize and agree with their views, sharing the same struggles presented to especially the Third Estate. This sudden increase in support led to obviously a growing amount of passion, directly leading to their new motives to now take over and rule the country of France. This, however, could not only be done peacefully. They had to take some more extreme measures in order to reach their goals as a separate power to make themselves heard among self-occupied monarchs. Some of these extreme measures caused damage, but led to success in the eyes of the revolutionaries as they stuck together no matter their separate groups or reasons for joining the movement. For example, they stormed the Bastille prison in an attempt to gain volunteer force for their protest. Also, many peasant mobs led by the revolutionaries of the Third Estate, known as the Great Fear, actually lived up to their name and instilled fear within the bystanders of the movement. While sticking true to their values and their reasons for fighting, such as lack of food from diminishing harvests and unfair distribution, lack of wealth from unequal taxes, and lack of representation within their government, they finally gained enough power to become the informal rulers of France. Although the monarchs were still in the picture, the National Assembly had begun to grow enough in strength to match and possibly exceed the power of the king and the queen. They still, however, had no respect for the monarchs, as they were not helpful in aiding the Third Estate with their issues. Besides the fact of wanting a government based from a constitution, they still had one important necessity on their minds. This was equal rights between each social group. However, the only thing that was standing in their way was the monarch still being in a position of power. They at first wanted some form of a statement that instated fair treatment between the estates, giving everyone a fair opportunity before any sort of political change was made. There were many reasons for this desirable change, all the same from the reasons and problems leading to the revolution. As stated before, there was inequality in how much food was provided within social classes due to failed harvests, as well as there was an inequality paying taxes, with the rich paying nothing compared to those of the Third Estate. These flaws of the French state led to the creation of one of the most important breakthrough documents, the Declaration for the Rights of Man and Citizen. This document was a step that provided rights of liberty, private property, and inviolability of a person and resistance to oppression throughout the social distinctions. Along with many other rights that it provided, this document was a stepping stone to the increased equality between social classes. Despite the fact that it appealed to most of the population, especially the Third Estate, it never did settle well with the monarchs. The monarchs obviously disliked the authority that the National Assembly was growing to have over them, but due to their increasing power, they could easily overrule the decisions of the king with the many people on their side. The representatives of the National Assembly began to rule France as if it was their own, slowly dissolving out the rule of the monarchy. Eventually, the National Assembly saw the monarchy as no longer necessary and just as an obstacle to their beliefs, so they were forced to leave the Palace of Versailles through the effects of the Women's March, which was put on by angry peasant women on the National Assembly. The king and the queen, being exiled, allowed for them to prosper and finally get a grasp on their goals. The National Assembly now had full control, providing the public an opportunity and an effect on their country by allowing them to implement their thoughts within the government. In the end of the reign of the National Assembly, they inspired many ideas of reform and provided the drive and proof that one could be successful if they fight for what they believe in. Although the National Assembly only reigned for a short period of time thereafter, it taught the citizens of France that they were stronger than they believed. They constructed the path for revolution, and even though they came from nothing, they gave themselves a voice. This is the National Assembly, fighting to be heard when nobody believed they could make a change for the better. Thank you.